I keep going back to the moment I found out. Not because it still hurts. It does, but that's not why. I keep going back to it because of how calm I was. I didn't scream, didn't break anything, didn't even raise my voice. I just stood there in my own kitchen, holding the phone in my hand, reading a message that was never meant for me, and I felt something settle inside me, like a decision being made without words. If you think being betrayed by a wife can hurt, you're wrong. Being betrayed by your best friend is a whole different kind of pain. A lot worse. I had no intention of crying, begging, or asking why. I was going to wait, watch, and when the right moment came, I was going to take back everything they thought they had taken from me. This is my revenge story. Here's how I did it. Let me tell you about Marcus first, because you need to understand who he was to me before you can understand what he did. Marcus Webb and I met in college, sophomore year, over a broken radiator in the parking lot of our dorm. We were both automotive engineering students, both broke, both too stubborn to ask anyone for help. We spent 4 hours fixing that radiator together, and by the end of it, we were finishing each other's sentences. That kind of friendship doesn't happen twice in a lifetime. At least that's what I used to think. We graduated the same year, moved to the same city, and 7 years later, we co-founded Webb & Carter Automotive Consulting. His name first, because he was the one who landed our first client, a regional dealership group that trusted him more than they trusted me back then. The business was doing well, really well. We had grown from 2 guys working out of a shared office to a team of 11, with contracts across 3 states. Marcus was the face of the company, charismatic, great with clients, the kind of person who walks into a room and immediately becomes the most important person in it. I handled the operations side, the numbers, the systems. We had always been a good team, and I trusted him completely, which is the part I have the hardest time forgiving myself for now. Not the trust itself, because trust between friends shouldn't need to be justified, but the blind spot that came with it. The things I couldn't let myself see because I didn't want to. My wife's name is Diana. We had been married for 6 years when this happened. We met through Marcus, actually. He introduced us at a company dinner, thought we'd get along, and on that one he was right too. Diana worked in marketing, was sharp and funny, and had this way of cutting through nonsense that I found incredibly attractive. We had our problems like any couple does, but I thought we were solid. I thought we were the kind of couple that gets through things. I never once considered I was living with someone who was capable of cheating, and cheating with my best friend of all people. That kind of family betrayal doesn't even have a name. I was building a life with her. I had plans, a house in the suburbs, a bunch of kids. I thought we wanted the same things. On that one, I was wrong too. The way I found out was so ordinary that it almost made everything worse. It was a Tuesday night in February. Diana had gone to bed early, saying she had a headache, and I was in the living room going over footage from a client presentation we were putting together. Her phone was on the coffee table. She had left it there when she went upstairs. It buzzed twice. I wasn't going to look. I genuinely wasn't. But it buzzed a third time, and when I glanced over, I could see the message preview on the screen without even unlocking it. It was from Marcus. And what it said, in plain text on my wife's phone at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night, was something no business partner sends to his co-founder's wife. I picked up the phone. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I didn't have a lot of options in that moment. I unlocked it. Diana had never had a passcode, which now feels like its own kind of detail, and I read the whole thread. They had been texting for 8 months. 8 months of messages that made it very clear what was happening and that it had been happening for longer than I wanted to calculate. There were things in that thread I will never be able to unread. But there were also things that turned out to be useful later. And that night, even in the middle of everything I was feeling, some part of my brain was already filing them away. I put the phone back exactly where it was. I went upstairs. I lay there listening to Diana breathe in the dark for a long time. Then I went back downstairs and started thinking. Here's the thing about being betrayed by your best friend and your wife at the same time. The grief and the anger don't arrive in any particular order. They don't take turns. They hit you all at once, from every direction, and the only way to stay functional is to find something to focus on. What I focused on was this. Marcus and I had built something together. A real business with real value, with clients who trusted us and employees who depended on us. Half of that was mine, and I was not going to let what he had done cost me the thing I had spent 7 years building. Whatever happened with Diana, whatever happened with the marriage, the business was not going to be his to keep. I've heard people say that family drama destroys you from the inside out, and they're right, but I wasn't going to let it. That night I made a decision and I never went back on it. The first thing I did was nothing. I know that sounds strange, but the worst thing I could have done in that moment was act on impulse. The next morning, I went into work and sat across from Marcus at our weekly partners meeting. Listened to him talk about Q2 projections and client retention, looked at him the way I always looked at him, and said the things I always said. He had no idea. And the fact that he had no idea, that he sat there completely comfortable, completely confident, without even a hint of worry, told me everything I needed to know about how little he respected me. Which made what came next a whole lot easier. I spent the next 2 weeks doing 3 things. First, I hired a private attorney who specialized in business disputes and partnership dissolutions, someone Marcus had never heard of, in a city we didn't operate in, someone with no connection to our professional network. Second, I went through every document related to the business that I had access to. Every contract, every financial statement, every partnership agreement. I was looking for anything that gave me leverage, anything that clarified my rights, anything that could be used to establish the value of my stake in the company and protect it in a dispute. Third, and this is the part that took the most discipline, I kept acting completely normal around both Marcus and Diana. Trust me, that was not easy. What my attorney found when he reviewed the partnership documents was interesting. Marcus had been the one to handle most of the legal paperwork when we started the company, which I had allowed because I trusted him and because he was better than me at client relationships. What I hadn't paid close enough attention to was a clause in our original partnership agreement that gave either partner the right to trigger a mandatory dissolution under specific conditions, one of which was a demonstrated breach of fiduciary duty. My attorney read me that clause over the phone and then said very quietly, "Do you have any evidence of conduct that might constitute a breach of trust in the context of this partnership?" I told him I'd get back to him on that. Here's what I found when I looked more carefully at the business finances. Marcus was an automotive consultant, not an accountant, but he had always handled the invoicing because he was the one with the client relationships. What I discovered, going through 18 months of invoices and payment records, was a pattern of small discrepancies. Nothing large enough to be immediately obvious, but consistent. Expenses billed to client, accounts that didn't match what I knew we had actually spent. Small amounts redirected through a vendor account I didn't fully recognize. I brought everything to my attorney, and he brought in a forensic accountant. The forensic accountant took 10 days. When she came back, the number she gave me was $43,000 over 2 years. I want to be honest about something here. Finding that money wasn't the most important thing to me. It wasn't even really about the money. It was the fact that Marcus had looked at me, his friend, his partner, the person who had spent 7 years building something alongside him, and decided I wasn't paying close enough attention. He decided I was someone he could take from. That is a specific kind of betrayal that goes beyond the affair, beyond the business, beyond all of it. It's the decision to look at someone you trust and treat that trust as a resource to exploit. That's what I couldn't forgive, and that's what made me want to make sure the consequences were proportional. I filed for partnership dissolution on a Thursday morning in April. Marcus found out when his attorney called him. The same morning I texted Diana asking her to be home by 6 because we needed to talk. I had decided to handle both things on the same day. Not to be cruel, or maybe a little too cruel, I won't pretend otherwise, but because I didn't want to spend one more day living inside a version of my life that wasn't real. By the time I got home that evening, Marcus had already called me 4 times. I didn't answer. Diana was sitting at the kitchen table when I walked in, and the look on her face told me she already knew something was happening. The conversation with Diana was the hardest thing I have ever had to do. Not because I was angry, I was, but the anger was something I had already processed to some degree over the previous weeks. It was hard because she was someone I had loved, and part of me still did. And watching someone you love realize they've been caught and that no version of that conversation ends well for them is genuinely painful, even when they are the one who caused it. She cried. She apologized. She said things that might even have been true. I listened to all of it. Then I told her I wanted her out of the house by the end of the month and that my attorney would be in touch. The partnership dissolution took 4 months to finalize. Marcus fought it, which I expected. His attorney made arguments about the dissolution clause, about the valuation of my stake, about the forensic accountant's findings. My attorney had anticipated every single one of those arguments. The financial discrepancies were documented and provable. The clause was enforceable. And because Marcus had been the one to draft the original partnership agreement, his own attorney had a hard time arguing against the language his client had written. In the end, I walked away with a settlement that reflected the full value of my stake in the company, plus an additional amount to resolve the financial discrepancy claim. Marcus got to keep the business. But he had to buy me out at a price that made it very uncomfortable for him to do so. The clients found out, the way things always do in a small industry. Not because I said anything directly. I didn't need to. The dissolution filing was public record. The circumstances became known through the professional network we shared, and Marcus's reputation took the kind of hit that is very hard to recover from when your entire business model is built on trust. 2 of our biggest clients reached out to me directly after the dissolution. Both of them eventually moved their contracts to a new consulting arrangement I set up independently. Marcus kept the name and the office. I kept the relationships that actually mattered. Diana and I divorced. It wasn't a pleasant process, but it was a relatively fast one. We didn't have kids, which made things simpler. And I think at some point, Diana understood that fighting me wasn't in her best interest, given the circumstances. I moved into an apartment on the other side of the city. I got a dog, which I had always wanted, and Diana had always been against. I started sleeping better almost immediately, which probably tells you something about the state of that marriage, even before I found out what I found out. I think about Marcus sometimes. Not with hatred. That took too much energy, and I stopped bothering with it after the settlement was signed. But I think about the specific calculation he must have made at some point, when he looked at everything we had built together and decided that what he wanted was worth more than any of it. That calculation turned out to be wrong. The business without the client relationships I had spent years building is not the same. The company is smaller now than when I left it. I know this because people in the industry talk, and because one of the clients who followed me told me recently that Marcus had let 2 more people go. I didn't feel satisfied when I heard that. I felt tired mostly, and a little sad for the version of us that existed before any of this happened. When someone betrays you, especially someone you trusted completely, especially someone who was supposed to be on your side, the instinct is to react right away. Confront them, accuse them, make them feel what you're feeling. I get that instinct. I felt it too, but the smartest thing I did was nothing. 2 weeks of nothing while I gathered information, understood my rights, and built a case that couldn't be argued with. When I finally acted, I did so from a position of complete preparation, and Marcus, who had spent months feeling untouchable, had no time to prepare. Stay calm, document everything. Never let anyone see you coming. Some people call it karma, others call it pro-revenge. I just call it being prepared. Marcus thought he had gotten away with it. What he actually did was teach me that the most dangerous person in a room isn't the one who yells, it's the one who smiles, waits, and already knows how it ends.